Is this a proof?
Hello, this is Plimble McFlamp. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Paul Erdős, one of the greatest mathematicians of the last century, with a staggering over 1,500 papers and whole new fields to his and his collaborators' names. When and where were you born?
Can I ask one question before we start?
Yes?
What is a metric outer measure?
I don't know, Mr. Erdős. But can you tell me when and where you were born?
I was born in Budapest, 1913.
Where did you live?
From the time I became a traveling mathematician, I did not have a fixed address. I was, except for the people I stayed with, effectively homeless. I would show up at someone's house, work with this person until we had solved any math problems in the vicinity, and move on. My motto was, another roof, another proof. Often, I would show up at someone's house, announce, my brain is open, work on math for a few days, and then leave. Speaking of leaving, I said that someone died when he or she stopped doing math, and that he or she left when they died. As you might have guessed, math is extremely important to me. What does this bunch of symbols mean?
I don't know, Mr. Erdős.
For the record, I left at a conference in Warsaw in 1996, just a few hours after solving the last problem I would solve. What is Milne's device?
I certainly don't know if you don't know, Mr. Erdős. Who did you work with or give credit to?
My greatest collaborator is my mother. She indirectly caused me to become this interested in math at a young age.
How? Please elaborate.
She was worried about the spread of diseases, so she homeschooled me, which left me more time to do math, as there was a different schedule when a teacher came to my house. For the last 7 years of her life, she traveled to all the conferences I went to with me. When she died, in order to run away from the fact of her death, I threw all my attention at math. It turns out that didn't work, because all it did was remind me of her death more. Yes, it was 5 years ago, but I miss her very much. My mother, in several major ways, is responsible for my entire mathematical career. Second is Ronald Graham, the combinatorialist. He is known for a very large number called Graham's number you may have heard of. I published 40 papers with Graham and worked with him for decades. Because he worked in the same field as me and published most papers with me, he is the highest level collaborator of anyone.
How many papers have you published?
Honestly, I've forgotten the exact count. It is approximately 1,500 if you count all the papers with me and my collaborators. Of which there were a total of 485. Third is anyone. As a result, third on my list, tied, are the other 484, because their conversations led me to a great number of my discoveries.
How fascinating. Tell me, Mr. Erdős, what do you list as your greatest mathematical accomplishments?
To start my mathematical career, I optimized a proof that had already been discovered. I considered the existing proof clumsy, so I made a new one. My proof can be found by clicking on the link, which I will provide at the end of the presentation, as it is too long to fit in the presentation. I'll tell you once and I'll tell you again, there was always a prime between n to n. I was more well known, however, for posing problems than for solving them. What is this equation here? What is the energy inequality?
I don't know, Mr. Erdős.
This is the first time I posed a problem. It remained unsolved for 80 years. It is still unsolved. I preferred solving my chosen problems like elementary methods, or ones that only used a set of real numbers. One of the other things I was known for was building up child prodigies by pouring problems on them as if they were professional mathematicians, according to Joseph Pelikan, one of the prodigies I met when he was 15. And sadly, some of them burnt out. Take Louis Posad, who was publishing papers as a professional mathematician at the same age, 15 years old, and had finished his career by the time he was 20. haven't studied this in a while. Can someone refresh me as to what these squiggly lines mean?
I don't know, Mr. Erdish.
I eventually went on to pose so many problems. What's the Navier-Stokes problem? There is no official list. Mathematicians often use the easier ones to get their research started, or so I have heard. My friend Graham maintains this list.
What were the greatest obstacles to your mathematical success?
The first large obstacle was that security agents from various countries were trying to keep me from traveling to conferences and the next mathematician who I wanted to work with. For example, I lived annoying travel authorities during the Cold War. So whenever I wanted to travel between democratic and communist countries to work with mathematicians, it caused trouble. I still remember the time that I wrote to my friend Peter, "Dear Peter, my spies tell me that Sam, the US, is building an atomic bomb. Tell me, is that true?"
Why did you do this?
First, could you answer the question of what a strongly hyperbolic system is?
No, sir, I cannot.
Well, I did not like being pushed around, and people wanted to push me around, and when they pushed me around, I wanted them to know that I didn't like being pushed around. Because of the anti-Semitic laws in my home country, Hungary, and my mother's political leanings, staying there would have been bad for my health. I needed to escape in order to save my life. Otherwise, I would not only be a ghost right now, I would not have had the time to discover everything that I did and share it, such as, let's see, problems about hypergraphs, relative primes. You look very confused.
I am confused, but go on, please.
My second obstacle was that my friends tended to get into big fights over who solved what. This story still annoys me, and it's been decades. Me and another mathematician solved a problem. Well, the editor requested a shorter proof. I supplied it. The original mathematician complained. A priority fight ensued. This wasted more time than it took me to write the proof. I had some fairly serious health problems that got in my way. I had a tired and sickly appearance and a wizened, cadaverous look of a drug addict, according to this book that some people wrote about me, which I seem to have misplaced right now. As a matter of fact, I was a drug addict for the last 25 years of my life.
Why did you take drugs?
If I didn't take drugs, to be precise, amphetamines, my productivity slowed down. In order to make more mathematical discoveries, particularly in the last 25 years of my life when I had an emotional motivation to do so, I took them. I was extremely close to my mother and would become homesick when I couldn't visit her. I would like to stress, again, this was during the Cold War. Traveling in democratic and communist countries was difficult, and whenever I was in a democratic country, I couldn't visit my mother because Hungary was a communist country. This made me extremely upset. I was also, utterly unable to take care of myself, often living off of other people, moving from house to house, and taking care of in return for solutions or help with mathematical problems.
Why were you unable to take care of yourself?
Because I didn't want to. I wanted to do math. I found number theory far more interesting than the real world, and I didn't like the real world that much to start with. They got their solutions or papers, and I got more time to do math. Everyone was happy. I existed on a web of trust, but if someone broke that web, I was in trouble.
What are some events in your life that you consider the most admirable or amazing?
What is this multivariable integral?
Mr. Erdish?
What?
What are some events in your life that you consider most admirable or amazing?
I personally didn't care. Although if I had to list a few, one of the ones that many others remember is that there was a problem that two analysts had just solved, with a solution running about 30 pages. I then looked at it for a few minutes and wrote a 2-line solution. People remember that to this day. What others regard, it seems, as impressive is that once at a conference I had to get a pacemaker as I passed out while asking a question and attended the closing banquet and finished asking the question. One of my coworkers said that said it all. Mathematics was my life, and he was right. Do you remember Posa? I mentioned him earlier. When I first met him, when he was 12, I asked him how to prove that two integers out of n plus 1 less than or equal to 2n were relatively prime. Posa responded that they were relatively prime because they were neighbors or consecutive. I was amazed and thought he was on the same level as the great Gauss.
Mr. Erdish, what do you think others find the most notable or unusual about you?
Well, I don't like boasting. To quote Grigory Perelman, who was active at the same time as me, I don't like being on display like an animal in a zoo. Of the 1525, or is it 1475, I forget, papers me and my collaborators have published, I only had a priority fight over one, and I despised that. The point being, I do not really know, and I do not enjoy bragging about myself. What the rest of the world, from reading my book, The Man Who Loved Only Numbers, absorbed in me is that I was simultaneously, to put it bluntly, a mathematical genius and a complete screw-up. Most people view, from what I've seen, publishing this many mathematical papers as to be quite impressive. It seems that people have also noticed that I got along extremely well with children, so well that once I complained that people were always taking pictures of me holding babies. Because, as I mentioned earlier, I was unable to take care of myself, and one of my former hosts, Janos Pak, still reminds me of the time when I was thirsty, wanted some tomato juice to drink, and after attempting to figure out how to open a carton, decided to stab it with a large knife in order to open it. I guess one of the most admirable characteristics then would be that I even lived as long as I did. Whenever he mentions that incident, I tell him to not bring rope into a house where a man's son has been hanged. By the way, have you seen my glasses?
You're holding them, Mr. Erdish.
They've broken again.
Well, thank you for spending some time with us today, Mr. Erdish. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.